Core systems transferring control to probe craft. Launch when ready.
We've all been there. You're just browsing around on Amazon when suddenly you spot something. It could be a book or an album or a DVD, and you think, well, I don't really need it, but at that price it's pretty tempting. Well, that was me not too long ago when this popped up as a lightning deal on Amazon. The original Battlestar Galactica on Blu-ray. Created in the wake of Star Wars by producer Glenn A. Larson, Battlestar Galactica ran for 24 episodes from 1978 through to 1979.
Sunday, September 17th, Battlestar Galactica arrives. The greatest space spectacular ever filmed. Somewhere beyond our galaxy, the civilization fights to survive. Join them aboard Battlestar Galactica.
Somewhere out in space, the 12 colonies of man are destroyed when their dreaded enemies, the robotic Cylons, launch a devastating final attack against the human race. Only one ship in the human battle fleet remains, the Battlestar Galactica, and it leads a fleet of survivors out of their home system and off into deep space in search of the mystical 13th colony.
This 13th colony, this other world, where is it and what's it called?
It lies beyond our star system, in a galaxy very much like our own, on a planet called Earth.
I first saw Galactica in the late 1990s when the BBC repeated it on BBC Two in their much-missed cult slot at 6 o'clock. For years, every weeknight at 6 until about 7:30 p.m, we'd usually get one or two episodes of The Simpsons or The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, followed by one of the Star Trek or Jerry Anderson series, or other then current American imports such as Sliders or Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Fascinating. Exciting stuff. It's great.
Galactica usually occupied the Monday night slot, but unlike most of the other shows in the cult schedule, it was one that I wasn't madly into, but would happily watch if it was on. I wouldn't be bothered if I missed it, but if I was in, I'd generally give it a look. It was bright and colourful and fun, and all the cool spaceship battles and robots and such appealed to the 10-year-old me, but there didn't seem to be much more to it other than a basic struggle of good against evil. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it felt like if you'd seen one episode, you'd pretty much seen them all. When Galactica's run ended, the BBC replaced it with Space 1999, and while that show went on to become one of my favourite television series of all time, Galactica just kind of faded away. I caught half an episode on the Sci-Fi Channel in the early 2000s. If you're interested, I think it was The Young Lords, but I'm not entirely sure. And then gave the series another shot when it was released on DVD, only to give up before the end of the 3-part version of the pilot film. Something just wasn't holding my interest the way it had done years before, and I just put it down to being older.
Well, you're not serious.
A proper high-definition transfer can do wonders for the watchability of old series and films, though, and a few years ago I found myself picking up the standalone release of the original pilot film in a 2 for £10 offer with something else. Settling down to watch with a big bowl full of strawberry jelly? What? I found that this was much better than I remembered. A lot better, actually. There were admittedly some parts that just didn't work. The final third, which sees the fleet of battle-scarred survivors jollying it up at a space casino, is a particularly puzzling sequence of events. But on the whole, I was very impressed. So when the Amazon offer came along, armed with vague but generally positive 20-year-old memories, I took the plunge and ordered that too. Just like the original film, what I found stood up much better than I was expecting it to. Not completely, and not always consistently, but enough to make for generally an enjoyable viewing experience.
That's good news.
For starters, damn is that a fantastic theme tune. One of the absolute best, and Patrick Macnee's narration sets the tone for the series beautifully.
Some believe that there may yet be brothers of man who even now fight to survive somewhere beyond the heavens.
In fact, and this may be sacrilege, but I don't care,
There are those who believe that life here began out there.
hooks my imagination even more than
Space, the final frontier.
does. The ancient astronauts concept has always really appealed to me, and I imagine that for a lot of people, this series would have been their first mainstream exposure to it. The title sequence also shows off one of the series' greatest strengths, the visual effects, the model work in particular. John Dykstra was in charge of the effects on Galactica, and they're more than up to the quality of the work he had done previously on Silent Running and Star Wars, and would later do again on Star Trek the Motion Picture. While it's obvious they only had enough money to shoot so much material for the pilot episode, and then had to reuse it as much as possible throughout the rest of the series, It's all very impressive stuff, which still stands up today, even in the notoriously unforgiving world of high definition.
Launch all remaining Vipers.
And I still want a real-life Viper in the same way that I still want a real-life Eagle or a real-life X-Wing, so the design clearly still works. What the opening titles don't quite capture is what I consider the biggest triumph of the series, the characters, and in particular the three main leads.
We love freedom, we love independence, to feel, to question, to resist oppression. To them, it's an alien way of existing they will never accept.
Lorne Greene's Commander Adama is very much the glue that holds the show together. A believable, determined commander and resourceful leader of the fleet, but also a man of great wisdom and intellect. By all accounts, Greene was deeply committed to the series, and that really shines through in his performance. With a lesser actor in this role, the show might have floundered a little, but even when things are at their silliest, and unfortunately things do get very, very silly at times, he's never giving it less than his all, and there's a real dignity at the heart of his performance that I found to be one of the highlights of the show.
Something marvelous has happened here. Please, do not let it pass unnoticed.
Alongside him, we have the two characters around whom most of the action revolves, Dirk Benedict's Starbuck and Richard Hatch's Apollo. Both are hugely likeable, and as with Lorne Greene, it's difficult to imagine the show without them. Each is a young, dynamic man of action, but each is also their own distinct character. Starbuck is the brash, fun-loving womanizer.
May as well live for today. We might not have many left.
And Apollo the more thoughtful and rational one.
Looking back is contagious. Decay and corruption go hand in hand with defeatism and lack of action.
The pair work well together and separately. The commitment of both actors to the project is obvious throughout, and indeed remained obvious in the long years since the show went off the air. And something else that genuinely surprised me looking back at the show all these years later was just how well it presented its female characters. For a late 70s series, you'd maybe expect to have just one or two, and for them to largely be relegated to standing around looking pretty or fretting about their men and not doing much else. But Galactica deserves to be recognised for including strong roles for women in an era that was really only just taking the first tentative steps in that direction.
This round's on me.
Yes, there are some episodes where they're sidelined so the boys can do all the cool stuff, and that's unfortunate. But more often than not, the Galactican ladies usually play some vital role in the stories.
We will be showing you the first pictures of something that has been described as the most significant event in history.
Despite only appearing in the pilot film and the subsequent two-parter, Jane Seymour's Serena is a lovely character, a determined and resourceful survivor, and I think she could have been a real asset to the show had she stuck around.
My name is Cassiopeia.
Cassiopeia. It's beautiful. Means fairy queen, doesn't it?
Likewise, Lorette Spang's Cassiopeia was a character originally destined to die during the first episode, but thankfully escaped the axe, or in this case being used as food by a race of insect people, and went on to become an integral part of the series. It's not the case you might find on other shows where one female character is the strong one and the other just kind of fades into the background. Both of them are strong in different ways. They're also not confined to the roles that we first see them in either. Serena goes from a news reporter to a fighter pilot, and Cassie goes to being a nurse and occasional commando after originally being a sociolator, which, if I'm reading the show correctly, is somewhere between a geisha and a prostitute?
It's an honorable profession, practiced with the blessings of the elders for over 4,000 years.
I didn't say anything.
Later on, another female character is introduced, fighter pilot Lieutenant Sheba, who I actually don't remember from my original viewing of the series, but this time I developed a bit of a crush on Sheba, if I'm honest.
Is that really necessary?
Why not? She's fab! By far the best female character on the show, Sheba is very much the equal of Starbuck and Apollo, which means she's usually to be found right in the centre of things in a way that wouldn't have been possible for the other Galactican ladies.
I do see what you mean.
I don't remember hearing her mentioned that often in the ranks of female role models of the 1970s, but she thoroughly deserves to be, as Anne Lockhart brings so much to the role.
I think it's wonderful.
Likewise, another character I found stole the show whenever he appeared was George Murdoch's Dr. Salek.
You have your orders, Doctor.
And you, sir, have a problem with finding another doctor.
Although not to the extent that I had a crush on him. I'm sure he was a very nice man, but no. I'm marrying Sheba, and that's that.
They won't shut up.
There are one or two characters who don't quite work out. Maren Jansen's Athena, introduced at the start of the series as one of the main characters, is increasingly sidelined after Sheba is introduced, supposedly because the producers were unhappy with her performance, which...
They trusted us to protect them, and we...
Well, she's not bad as such, just clearly inexperienced. She had a definite place in that world, and it would have been a shame if, had the series continued, they had decided to drop her for good.
The key thing in remembering, adapting, is time.
Another character who largely gets forgotten about is Terry Carter's Colonel Ty, although this time there seems to be no very good reason for that, since Carter was clearly capable of doing great work. He just starts getting left out of the loop or forgotten about towards the end, and it's to the overall detriment of the series.
Barman.
And amazingly enough, I found that this time around, even Boxy and Muffet weren't annoying me as much as they had in the past. Yeah, we gotta put a cute kid in there and his stupid pet robot dog thing, because we gotta get kids watching, and kids like watching other kids, right? Actually, one of the biggest surprises of this rewatch was discovering that Muffet was played by a chimpanzee. I guess I just ignorantly or naively, no, probably ignorantly, assumed that that was Kenny Baker or one of his Ewok chums in that costume. Learning that that's an actual real animal in that costume kind of gives me a new appreciation for these two characters. They still clearly don't need to be there, but it's kind of sweet watching them together, knowing that the obvious bond they share isn't between two actors, but one actor and a chimp. Towards the end of the run, they too disappeared, but really, I'd have hated to see any of the regular characters vanish altogether. The show has a really fun cast, and it's nice to spend time with them, which is useful considering the lackluster nature of some of the stories. Many of the standalone early episodes are nothing special, and a lot of them seem to follow the same formula. Either Starbuck or Apollo crash land on a planet, run into some local trouble which they help clear up, and then away they go again.
Let's go home.
It's clear the show was rushed into production, probably because the original plan was to produce several TV movies rather than a fully fledged series, and so stories were written to whatever sets happened to be available. So here's a western town, here's a castle. Did we already use the western town? Oh, whatever, use it again. After such a strong opening, the quality drops off fairly quickly, and while it does recover later on, the viewing figures sadly didn't. But where this show's storytelling excels, however, is in its two-parters. Lost Planet of the Gods follows on from the pilot movie in a similarly strong vein, and builds to a surprisingly emotional finale, while The Gun on Ice Planet Zero, just saying that makes me smile, is basically the Guns of Navarone in space, but with lots of action and a very strong guest cast, including Roy Thinnis, Britt Eklund, Dan O'Harely, James Olsen and Richard Lynch. But it was the following pair of two-parters that ensured the show would gain a loyal fan following that continues to this day. As The Living Legend and War of the Gods both show just how good this series could be at its best.
You have no idea how I feel at this moment.
Me too, Adama, me too.
Helped enormously by having a charismatic guest actor giving a huge boost to the show's credibility in each story.
I may be the most stubborn, egocentric warrior in the history of the colonies, but I'm also the best damn warrior in the history of the colonies, and I don't intend to be remembered as the one who pulled out and left a lot of defenseless civilians at the mercy of those tin-headed, gall-monging Cylons.
With Lloyd Bridges in Legend and Patrick Macnee in War, these stories allow the series to play around with big ideas that it had previously shied away from, with the stakes raised far above the norm and many new elements being added to its core mythology. Religion and mysticism begin to creep in, and had the series continued, I strongly suspect both these stories would have been returned to, which would have been great to see.
I've come to prepare your way to Earth.
In particular, Patrick Macnee, who in addition to narrating the opening titles also provided the voice of the Cylon Imperious leader,
Let the attack begin,
is just astonishingly good in his role as the enigmatic Count Ibley, found on an abandoned planet suffering from amnesia. Taken aboard the Galactica, Ibley begins to display a very persuasive streak as his memories and powers begin to return, until eventually we discover, no, it's too good to spoil. Go and watch it. Especially if you're a Patrick Macnee fan, you owe it to yourself to see this one.
That voice. There's something about your voice. I've heard it before.
Despite a general familiarity with the series, I found I wasn't recalling any particular episodes. But as soon as he walked on screen in this one, a lot of memories came flooding back.
And we'll meet again.
The only real stinker in this batch of long stories is Greetings from Earth, a feature-length episode shown as a two-parter in reruns, which starts out extremely strongly with the discovery of a space capsule containing humans in suspended animation. Are these people from Earth? How do we revive them? Should we revive them?
We don't know what we're doing!
An exciting story idea providing lots of dramatic moments throughout the first half, all of which fizzles out entirely during the second half, when it becomes clear that these people aren't from Earth at all, but here are some silly robots who can sing and dance and tell jokes, so who cares? And incredibly, this scene comes not 5 minutes after the female guest character sobs her heart out on discovering her father's grave. Yeah, it fits about as well as you might imagine.
I love the dear lad just the same.
What, you want more? Well, ooh, look, space Nazis! Yeah, look, we used up all the best ideas in the first half. There's nothing left now. Surprisingly, for a series made in the pre-home video era, the show also pays a great amount of attention to its own continuity. Not really to the extent of story arcs or anything you'd find in a series produced today, but enough characters and events are called back over the run to make you realise the people behind the scenes really did care about the show they were making.
They're really gonna give us a medal? Or did I say us? I think they're just decorating me!
One of the final episodes, Baltar's Escape, even picks up on story threads left over from not one but 3 previous episodes, although this is likely due to the fact that the limited budget meant they had to reuse the sets and costumes they'd already made as much as possible. Yes, by the end it's clear that the money is running out. The series becomes more and more shipbound as it draws to a close, and the Cylons are almost completely forgotten about. Nevertheless, the final episode still ends things on a high, with the discovery of a mysterious signal that could be from Earth, and one final epic battle with the Cylons. And speaking of the Cylons, yeah, I love these guys. From the waist up, they look and sound awesome, utterly awesome, especially in scenes with low lighting. The way that red Cyclops eye and the chrome finish sparkle really make them look rather impressive. But then from the waist down, they're wearing what look like kilts and oversized boots. The disconnect between the two halves is hilarious. They veer from being a credible threat to a complete joke, sometimes within the same scene.
We took them by surprise.
Apparently it was not as big a surprise as we had hoped for.
And as for the non-Centurion Cylons...
By your command.
I didn't remember this guy either. How did I not remember this guy? Well, top marks for trying, guys, but can we do anything to up the threat level here a bit?
You are Baltar?
As if you don't remember,
Well, luckily the Cylons have a human ally in the fantastic John Colicos as the treacherous Count Baltar, always great value no matter what show he turned up in. The journey he takes across the course of the series is a fascinating one, as, despite not having any clear reason for betraying humanity to the Cylons, his fortunes are constantly shifting, and even when he's at his lowest point, we still never know which way he's going to turn. By giving a human face to the Cylon threat, the show negated a lot of the problems it might have run into had these slightly goofy-looking robots been the only villains. As cool as they look, extended dialogue scenes between them never quite worked.
I understand the scouts came back with exciting news. I hope they have found the humans.
But with Baltar on hand to supervise things, or so he thinks, the show manages to keep the Cylon threat just about credible.
I don't want to miss a moment of the last Battlestar's destruction.
I really think you should look at the other Battlestar.
What are you babbling about,
Now, this show's not perfect by any means. Like I said, there are a lot of forgettable episodes in the early half of the series, and the production design and overall look of the thing is very much of the 1970s, yet the great characters and sheer sense of fun make up for a lot of its obvious flaws.
Some home. A piece of metal in the middle of nowhere. It's just plain nowhere, at least until we find Earth. You think we'll ever really find it? We'll find it. Someday.
And as the series draws to a close, you really get a sense that the people making it had finally figured out its strengths, and would have probably continued to build on those had the series returned for another year.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I know.
But alas, there was one enemy facing the crew of the Galactica that would prove to be even more deadly than the Cylons: the executives at ABC. Faced with increasing production costs and dwindling ratings, the decision was made to pull the plug.
What else can go wrong?
Galactica's mission was to be cut short by cancellation after only one season, with the ragtag fugitive fleet seemingly never to complete their lonely quest to find that shining planet known as Earth.
We have at last found Earth.
Oh, wait, yeah, they did find it, didn't they? Oh, frack. Okay, join me next time for that one.
That's it. Thank you. And good luck.